This is Jill Dando, who was a prominent 37-year-old UK television presenter in the 1990s and was assassinated with a single bullet to the head on the 26th of April 1999 on the doorstep of her London home in broad daylight. The case is still unsolved. After watching this film, if you have been named and want to write to me to clarify anything, please get in touch with me. I'll be happy to put out an update if your information gets us closer to the truth. As you may know, I have made previous films about other high-profile cases, such as the Madeleine McCann case, the Didcot murders, and the Cumbria massacres. First, I wish to point out the motivation for making such films. Some true crime filmmakers make their films because they wish to appeal to the public's interest in mysteries and satisfy public curiosity about unsolved police investigations. This is not why I make such films. I believe that in a very small number of criminal cases, that the police are not allowed to solve the case. That the police are compromised by higher authority, either before the crime occurs or immediately after it, and a cover-up operation is put in place to prevent the crime from ever being solved. Sometimes in these cases, the police will be directed to solve the case using a bogus narrative and false evidence. In other words, a cover-up is approved from a level above Chief Constable, which would be by the Home Office or by MI5. I could go into the different reasons why a police cover-up might be instigated, but that is not the remit of this film. The possible reason for a police cover-up in the Jill Dando case will become clear as I explain all of the evidence. This is something that true crime reporters will sometimes overlook when they are drawn into high-profile unsolved criminal cases. They wrongly believe that the police are telling the truth about the evidence, and they wrongly believe that the police have been trying to solve the case, and that the case is just too difficult for them to solve. They don't realise that the case is never meant to be solved, nor ever will it be solved by the police. In my opinion, in these admittedly fairly rare cases, the upholders of the law, i.e. the police, are forced to break the law by perverting the course of justice themselves and by covering up evidence and not running a proper investigation. Whenever this happens, it needs to be exposed. Many people have written to me asking my opinion on the Dando case and if I intend to make a film about it. Having carried out detailed research, I now believe that the Jill Dando case was never meant to be solved from word go, by the police at least, and this will become apparent as we go along. The evidence I have uncovered, I believe, is important enough to be brought to public attention, hence the reason for producing this film. The case is a cover-up, and that's why I am uncovering it in this film. There have been a number of films and reports made about the Dando murder which have put forward theories about the motive for what happened. I will look at all of these theories later in the film and address why there are so many and what evidence supports them. I'll also talk more about Jill Dando and the case itself a bit later. But to start with, there is a story which I need to tell you about in some detail because it's not widely known about and it might be critical in establishing the motive for Jill Dando's murder. This is David Copeland. Copeland is known as the London nail bomber and is alleged to have assembled and planted 3 nail bombs, each one about a week apart, being detonated at various locations around London in April 1999. There's quite a lot to go through before I establish a link to Jill Dando, so please pay attention and bear with me. All will become clear as we progress. The bombs were contained inside holdalls and consisted of up to 1,500 nails, killing in total 3 people and injuring 140. The first bomb was placed on the street of a largely Afro-Caribbean community, Brixton, the second in a street in a Bengali community, Brick Lane, and the third, in which 3 people were killed, in a popular gay area in Soho inside the Admiral Duncan pub. Copeland is currently serving a recommended 50-year sentence for these crimes. Copeland was a member of various what are termed far-right groups. He is described as a neo-Nazi. He was a member of the BNP and a member of an organisation called the National Socialist Movement. The basic sequence of events about these bombs is fairly well documented. A number of documentaries have been produced. However, as is often the case with terrorist attacks, sometimes information which is put out by the police and the media is distorted, omitted, added to, or concealed for various reasons. And it seems that certain elements of this case have been concealed with the help of a number of mainstream outlets and operatives. It's important first for me to point out the timeline and placement of the various nail bombs. The 3 bombs were set off on 3 successive weekends. The first nail bomb was set off on Saturday the 17th of April at 5:26 p.m. on Electric Avenue in Brixton, London. This was near a very busy street market which has a high black population. The bomb injured over 48 people, some seriously. The second nail bomb was set off a week later on Saturday the 24th of April on Brick Lane in London, which is the centre of London's Bangladeshi community, injuring 39 people. The third nail bomb was set off a further week later in the early evening on Friday the 30th of April after being placed inside a pub, the Admiral Duncan in the Soho district of London. The pub is located in the heart of the gay area of Soho. This time the bomb injured 70 and killed 3 people. The official story contends that Copeland acted alone and was influenced by his far-right beliefs to target black, Asian and gay people. He apparently admitted to planting all 3 bombs, and the first thing he said after police knocked on his door was, "They're all down to me and I did them on my own." Note that it took the police 12 days to get the CCTV image of him from Brixton and put it in the newspapers, during which time he planted 2 further bombs, injuring dozens and killing 3. It beggars belief that the CCTV image of him at Brixton was not placed in the media earlier. Various excuses have been put out to try and explain this. None of them are in the slightest bit convincing. If the CCTV images of Copeland had been released earlier, it is highly likely the deaths at Soho would have been prevented. But there is a convincing reason why the CCTV image of Copeland was not put in the media until it was too late, which is that MI5 were interfering, for some reason, with the police investigation and had been watching Copeland for some time, possibly even before the bombings. This will take some explaining, and I'll come back to David Copeland in a moment, but let's have a quick look at the background of Jill Dando and explain what she was like. A very well-liked person in the TV world. In 1997, Dando was voted the BBC Personality of the Year. Not long before her death, she was asked if she would present the BBC's coverage of the upcoming Millennium celebrations. She was born and brought up in Weston-super-Mare, which is a large town in the southwest of England. She had a middle-of-the-road comprehensive education and studied journalism in Cardiff. Known widely as a girl next door type of person, she was kind, modest, and had a good sense of humour. It's hard to believe that anyone would be offended by her. After working as a volunteer in her hospital radio in her hometown, she got a job as a trainee reporter in the local weekly newspaper, the Western Mercury. From there, she worked for BBC Local Radio as a newsreader and as a presenter on local television before getting her break in national television in 1988. She started at Crime Watch in 1995, which was a very popular national UK crime programme, and at the time of her death in 1999 was one of the most high-profile TV presenters in the country. She'd never been married, and after a number of relationships, met gynaecologist Alan Farthing in December 1997, and they announced their engagement in January 1999. They were planning to have a child. During my investigation, I have met or spoken to 3 people who knew Jill personally, and I can report that she was a very happy person and delighted to be getting married. You couldn't paint a rosier picture. Let's watch this clip with Noel Edmonds, just to see what a natural, intelligent, but modest person she was.
I've never seen anyone blush like this on camera before.
So you blushed just now, actually.
Yeah, Jill Dando.
I just stalled at these stop-go boards, and the workman has decided that he's not going to let me go because it took me too long to start the engine again. Ah, we can go. Good. Yes, I can. So embarrassing.
Okay, hold it.
Oh, this is really good, isn't it? This is no unicyclist. Oh, warning, unicyclist ahead.
And she was also a very perceptive television presenter.
Robbery.
There were around 200 items of antiques, paintings and silverware. Included in that was this painting. It's a photograph of the painting that was stolen. This is a painting of a lady called Henrietta Nelson, who died in 1815, was buried in the grounds of her home at Yaxley Hall in Suffolk. New owners of the hall, however, moved the grave and buried her in the family vault. As a result, her spirit roamed the grounds.
So I'd imagine they'd be quite keen to get rid of that portrait as quickly as possible.
We'd like to think so, yeah.
There are numerous indications which suggest that there were more to the London nail bombings of 1999 than just Copeland acting alone, and that security services may have had foreknowledge of what was to occur. I'm going to be referring to the work of Dr. Larry O'Hara, who investigates and exposes the activities of the intelligence agencies in his magazine, Notes from the Borderland. O'Hara has studied and written about the David Copeland bombings extensively. He was at Copeland's trial and has written about MI5's role in the whole affair. His magazines contain some very detailed analysis of the bombings and explore all of the anomalies within the official version of events. If you want to order copies of his articles, they can be obtained from this link and are in issues 3, 4, 5 and 6. The first article he wrote is some 25 pages long, followed by further shorter articles. The articles are fully referenced with footnotes. I don't have time in this film to read the entire articles, but I will summarize them and read some extracts of what I consider are the most important parts. The title of his first article says it all. Did MI5, police and their media assets allow Copeland to plant his bombs and cover up before, during and after? This might sound unbelievable to anyone who has not studied terrorist attacks in any detail, but it has been shown by many researchers over the years that government agencies are often involved in or facilitate acts of terrorism for a host of political agendas. I'm going to go through the timeline of events, pointing out some of the key anomalies, using Larry O'Hara's detailed articles, which shed light on what likely really did happen with the London nail bombs. CCTV was shown at the trial showing Copeland's movements in the days leading up to the first bombing, buying the materials for the bomb, and also CCTV showing his movements immediately before planting the bomb. Here's some quotes from Larry O'Hara. The film shown covered his getting into a taxi at Clapham Junction at 3:30 p.m. Not screened was visiting a pub for 20 minutes just before. Significant? Perhaps. If Copeland did meet anybody before the bombing, this would have been a good time and place. Also shown was intermittent footage of Copeland's presence in Brixton between 3:53 p.m. and 4:36 p.m. when he walked past McDonald's restaurant. There was then a 20-minute gap until footage shown resumed at 4:56 p.m. Maybe this film wasn't shown for technical reasons. We shall see. In a confusion that may be legitimate, footage showing Copeland actually planting the device had on it the time 3:34 p.m. Both the judge, Michael Hyam, Recorder of London, and prosecuting counsel Nigel Sweeney, with no demur from the defence, whose lead QC, Michael Walkind, spent much time playing computer games on a personal organiser, repeatedly stressed times shown on a videotape may be inaccurate. A valid point, certainly. However, this could also be a useful way of discrediting priori close temporal analysis of the sort here undertaken, for obvious reasons. There was opportunity for Copeland to liaise with others even in Brixton during his short visit to the Tate Gardens Library, for example. Unlikely, but possible. The footage shown and witnesses called about what happened to the bag after Copeland placed it rang true. This encompassed at first sight bizarre events, the bomb being moved numerous times, the bag it was in being stolen, and the security guard at Iceland's store vainly trying to warn passers-by. Unlike earlier coverage of Copeland's activities that day, this sequence of events was substantiated by mutually reinforcing witness statements and footage. An article from The Independent stated the bomb had been picked up by market traders and passed around to find out who it belonged to. George Jones, 42, said, "A holdall was handed to me by somebody who said someone had forgotten their shopping. I unzipped it and opened it wide, and I could see what it was. It was a square device with sticky tape and nails. I picked it up and put it by a brick wall to stop people getting hurt. Then it went off. I was blown across the road and a couple of nails lodged in my leg, and I was hit by concrete and glass." O'Hara's article continues. "It is beyond dispute that Copeland purchased materials for the bomb, took it to Brixton and left it, intending for it to explode, which it did." O'Hara points out that MI5 were involved very early on in the investigation because of an article in the News of the World published the day after the bomb, which claimed MI5 took control of the investigation last night as intelligence reports suggest the blast could have been the work of Serb militants. We know now the blast was not the work of Serb militants, and Larry O'Hara points out that the author of the article was a favoured police conduit. So it is likely that MI5 were involved at this stage. Larry O'Hara's article claims that MI5 copied all of the CCTV footage obtained by the police. On the 19th of April, 2 days after the bombing, a phone call was received from a phone box in Wellhall Road from a person claiming to be from a member of the far-right group Combat 18, admitting responsibility for the bombing. This call was recorded by the police. But a decision was made by police or MI5 not to play the call to the public. Larry O'Hara claims that the phone call was due to be played on the Crime Watch appeal, but for some reason was not aired. This could mean somebody within the investigation already knew at this point that the caller claiming to be from Combat 18 was not the bomber. Further calls from other far-right groups followed, but police decided they were probably all bogus.
We had several calls from people purporting to be from extreme right-wing groups, claiming association and indeed supporting the fact that the bomb had gone off. There was no intelligence or nothing to support that any of them were in actual fact responsible for the bomb.
Larry O'Hara now goes on to discuss the CCTV evidence and why it took 12 days to get an image of Copeland out to the public. There is the disturbing question of what happened to the Brixton film footage. Looked at superficially, we are asked to believe it took over 12 days between the 17th of the 4th and the 29th of the 4th for this footage to be analysed, still photographs developed sufficiently realistic to publicly release. On closer examination, that turns out to be only partly the case. It is worth remembering there are two vitally important and distinct pieces of relevant film. The first is that of Copeland as seen by the camera positioned inside the Iceland food store near to the bus stop where he placed the bomb. Unsurprisingly, given its function to detect shoplifters, that camera only shows the doorway. According to DCI Maureen Boyle, anti-terrorist squad officer in charge, we identified the man that we believe planted the bomb on the Iceland camera after officers spent many hours going through frame by frame. Jason Benito, that faithful voice of Scotland Yard, was more specific. He stated the first smudge or sighting of the bomber was made on the 19th of April from cameras filming the doorway of the Iceland food store. Another version says identification was only made by the 28th of the 4th. According to two directly police-sourced accounts, it took 6 days to decipher this footage, and by the 23rd of the 4th, it was sent to the Ministry of Defense and NASA in the USA. It is not in doubt that this film went to the US for enhancement. But there is more to it than that. For a start, such a delay and the necessity of going overseas is ridiculous. When, for example, Selfridge's store on Oxford Street could have processed seized footage in an hour. It defies logic to believe that the Met Police, given the ubiquity of cameras, don't possess such facilities. It is important to distinguish between taking a still from CCTV film and enhancing a picture so obtained. The suspicion has to be this footage was analysed far earlier, from the 19th of April on, than it was released. The logic would be that even at this stage there were other motives at play than merely finding the Brixton bomber, or indeed somebody, MI5 for example, had already worked out who he was. Larry O'Hara then gives an example of where MI5 in the past have deliberately delayed the release of CCTV images showing IRA terrorists. I want you to make a mental note of this, that Larry O'Hara believes MI5 may have already known who the Brixton bomber was on or before Monday the 19th of April 1999. Make a note of that date. His article goes on. The footage eventually used in the public domain to identify Copeland was not from Iceland's camera at all, but from an elevated camera. It shows him standing on the left and in front of two black men, and patently did not come from any shop camera. The fact is implicitly admitted in an official police account, mentioning that while the Iceland image was being looked at elsewhere, detectives continued their work of trying to identify further images of Copeland. Nothing in the key disinformational text by McLagan and Lowell's Mr. Evil contradicts this interpretation. Indeed, they admit that, within hours of the bombing, the police had obtained all the recordings for that Saturday afternoon, page 126. Not surprisingly, given the prominence of this publication, the authors do not distinguish between the Iceland footage and the elevation camera product. To have drawn attention to that would have laid bare what seems like a crucial police or state deception. A good picture of Copeland, the one eventually used successfully, did not have to be obtained from overseas, but was already at hand before the 29th of the 4th, as early as the 19th of the 4th in fact. In this respect, incessant reference to police retrieving 1,094 CCTV tapes with 26,000 hours of recording and spending 4,000 man-hours viewing them is also highly beside the point. For given there was a known location reference, where the bomb went off, and an exact time, as all cameras would have been jolted by the blast, the indisputably painstaking work necessary was not quite looking for a needle in a haystack. Larry O'Hara proposes that MI5 knew who Copeland was, knew what he was going to do, and did not want him identified just yet. He had 2 more bombs to plant, and as O'Hara states, his actions seemed to fit their agenda the Imminent Terrorism Act. The second nail bombing, the following Saturday, is also analysed in detail by Larry O'Hara. Copeland was captured on CCTV at various stores, buying all the components for his second bomb at different times in the week leading up to the second bombing. He was caught on CCTV on his way to plant the Brick Lane bomb at Waterloo train station and also getting into a taxi. Copeland placed the bomb outside 32 Hanbury Street, and it is claimed there is CCTV footage of him in Hanbury Street. But curiously, this footage was not shown at the trial, and I am not aware it has been shown anywhere. After the bomb was placed outside 32 Hanbury Street, it was then moved by a member of the public, Irishman Gerard Lynch, who thought it was a bag of tools. He carried it to his car 250 metres away on Brick Lane and put it in the boot. At some point he became suspicious about it and so left it in the boot and went to report it to the police. The bomb detonated whilst it was in the boot of his car. The area of Brick Lane and Hanbury Street is covered by CCTV, so there should have been continuous footage of Copeland as he arrives to the time he leaves. Larry O'Hara continues. Film of Copeland in Brick Lane was not shown in the court, although the existence of film showing Copeland with a bag in Hanbury Street and Commercial Street and placing the bomb outside 32 Hanbury Street was referred to, and one paper showed a still purporting to be Copeland in Brick Lane. In Mr. Evil is claimed there was no film of Copeland in Brick Lane, either a typically sloppy mistake or a purposeful lie. So, even more than with Brixton, there is at least 40 minutes of Copeland in the vicinity of a target not in its entirety accounted for by material actually shown. Indeed, the only footage of events in Brick Lane showed a motorist, Irishman Gerard Lynch, parking his car, putting the bag containing the bomb in the boot of it and walking away, first to the closed police substation in Brick Lane and then off camera towards Lehman Street when the bomb went off. And his testimony, including initially mistaking the bomb for a set of workman's tools, is one aspect of this case that does seem credible. Copeland, in his statement to police, claims he made a silent 999 call from a call box at 5:10 p.m. in Digby Street nearby. Allegedly, he decided to dump the bomb while still live, even though there was no market. The alternative explanation already suggested is this bomb at this time was no accident. Although Copeland claims plausibly to have then visited Soho by cab to reconnoitre his next target, this too was not shown on film. Indeed, there has been no response to police appeals in newspapers and magazines for whoever may have picked him up in the Brick Lane area to contact Scotland Yard. Again, while this may be for some innocent reason, another explanation fits the known facts, which would be that on arrival in Brick Lane, if not before, Copeland was tailed by a person or persons whose identity a section of the state wants to conceal. This is given credence by the most suspicious bombing of all, Soho. So Larry O'Hara believes authorities, perhaps Special Branch or MI5, may have been observing Copeland before he planted the second nail bomb. Before planting his third bomb inside a pub in Soho, Copeland was in the Soho area the day before, on the 29th of April, and visited the pub. It was on this afternoon that the image of Copeland first appeared in the media, in the Evening Standard, and then in mainstream papers the following day. Time was running short for him, so he returned to his home in Farnborough to get the contents of his next bomb, then went back to London that evening, where he checked into a hotel under a false name on St George's Drive, Victoria, the night of the 29th. No CCTV of him on that night arriving in London was shown in the court. Copeland made phone calls from a payphone outside the hotel, but it was not revealed who he called. On the morning of the 30th, he checked out of the hotel and into a second hotel where he prepared the next bomb. This was placed on the floor beside the bar of the Admiral Duncan pub on Old Compton Street and detonated at 6:37 p.m. Again, I will quote from Larry O'Hara. Copeland made his way to Soho. Arriving early, Copeland went to a so-called straight pub for half an hour. Needless to say, neither the name of the pub or any footage of Copeland approaching, entering, leaving it was shown. Yet again though, surely relevant and possible given there are supposedly at least 126 cameras visible to the naked eye alone in Soho. Footage was played of Copeland passing two shops at number 62 and 64 Compton Street, at first with the bag containing the bomb and later without it. It is well established Copeland left the bomb in the Admiral Duncan pub at 6 p.m. and left it between 5 and 10 past 6. The bomb exploded around 6:37 p.m, killing John Light, Nick Moore and the pregnant Andrea Dykes. That there is something suspect about the Soho bombing is given credence by an amazing story in Gay and Lesbian Weekly, The Pink Paper, which went to press 3 days before the bomb, although dated Friday the 30th of April. Written by David Northmore, the front page lead stated, "Gay communities around the country were on bomb alert this week after a second nail bomb in London last weekend." The next sentence stood out, claiming, "Home Office, police and gay businesses are urging gays and lesbians to be particularly vigilant." Home Office in this context patently refers to MI5, the security service. Thus we have, on the very day of the Soho bomb, a public hint MI5 thought gays a possible target. Afterwards, Northmore then felt the need to deny foreknowledge. Writing in The Independent, he wrote, "Did the Pink Paper receive a tip-off that such an attack would take place? Absolutely not. Had there been such information, we would have worked with the police to prevent the event from happening." O'Hara also states that ex-Naval Commander Duncan Lustig-Preen, who campaigns for gay rights in the armed forces, said, "MI5 sources informed me 3 days before the explosion that their intelligence was far more pessimistic over the gay angle than the Met Police position." And in an email sent 6 days before the Soho bomb, he wrote, "Intelligence sources with whom I remain in contact have advised me that Combat 18 are almost certain to be behind the 2 explosions in London recently. Sources say that Combat 18 has been planning such attacks for several months. There is also a possibility that they will also attempt to target the gay community." Note that the NSM, of which Copeland was a member, originated from a faction of Combat 18. Immediately after the bombing, Lustig-Preen contradicted his first email, stating, "I know from my contacts that even MI5 bounced by sudden change to LGBT target." Apparently, Lustig-Preen's views regularly appear in the Pink Paper, and O'Hara suggests that Lustig-Preen's credible links to MI5 may have been the channel that the original information came from to David Northmore. In Larry O'Hara's Issue 5 article, he explains how he was given information by a reliable source who was privy to aspects of the unfolding police investigation and asked searching questions. Intermittently, stories have surfaced Copeland was under surveillance when planting the Soho bomb. 2 important pieces of new information flesh out this rumour. First is reported comments by Scotland Yard's Detective Chief Superintendent Bunn to a pre-trial briefing under the auspices of John Grieve to interested parties, 1st of June 2000. According to someone present, now this someone was later named as Outrage founder member John Beeson, who was heard saying it by Simon Forbes, a member of the Met LGBT Advisory Committee. So, according to someone present, Bunn said of Copeland in Soho, "We were tracking him. Unfortunately, he gave us the slip. That's what caused the bomb to go off." In a later article, O'Hara gives more on this. There is yet more which Forbes did not say, in print here for the first time. In particular, at a pre-trial briefing in June 2000, Steve Greenwood, co-chair of LGBT Advisory Group, Linda Bellos, also co-chair and ex-Lambeth Council leader, along with Jerry Gable, Searchlight publisher, were shown by police extensive footage of Copeland being monitored in Soho on the 30th of April 1999. His article goes on, in the email from prominent gay rights campaigner Peter Tatchell to an Enquirer dated the 27th of June 2002, according to Tatchell, West End Central Police Station received a phone call about half an hour before the bomb went off. The phone call was from a special branch unit saying that they had lost their suspect in or near Broadwick Street. They requested backup. Their description of the suspect fitted Copeland's appearance and the bag he was carrying. The significance of this cannot be overstated. Special Branch were following Copeland before he planted the Soho bomb, therefore could have apprehended him at any time and prevented 3 deaths and 70 injuries, making them complicit in the bombing. Larry O'Hara also points out that if MI5 did have foreknowledge that the gay community were Copeland's next target, this foreknowledge might have been gathered if he was followed immediately after his Brick Lane bombing, when he is alleged to have travelled to Soho to decide on his next target. O'Hara also points out the possibility that Copeland was being steered and manipulated throughout his campaign by agent provocateurs, i.e. agents of the state. O'Hara's SU5 article goes on. While MI5 have no powers of arrest, it is unlikely they would entirely delegate watching Copeland to Special Branch. After all, there was no desire to stop Copeland. Indeed, MI5's aim may well have been to facilitate his campaign. So MI5 probably had their own unit independently shadowing both Copeland and Special Branch. O'Hara talks about the magazine Searchlight, which ostensibly publishes exposés of racism, anti-Semitism and fascism in the UK. However, O'Hara explains how he believes Searchlight is actually an MI5 front publication, used for a host of nefarious state operations. Searchlight claims to have moles embedded in certain organisations, such as the BNP, of which Copeland had been a member. O'Hara states, I know of no Searchlight asset who does not, on examination, turn out to be an agent provocateur or at the very least facilitator of violence. O'Hara discusses a Searchlight mole known as Arthur, who was a BNP infiltrator and monitored Copeland. He then spells out his reasons for believing that Arthur could have been Copeland's manipulator or handler and influenced him towards his crimes. He goes on to point out anomalies surrounding Searchlight's claim that they alerted Special Branch to Copeland's identity after his CCTV photograph was released. He explains that he believes this was deliberately delayed and that Copeland's name was merely added to a long list of other names rather than given to them individually. So in other words, he's claiming there was skullduggery going on regarding the release by Searchlight of Copeland's identity to the police. O'Hara provides further analysis of the other group Copeland was a member of, the NSM, a far-right group with a small number of members. 2 further far-right groups who Copeland denies being involved with are Combat 18 and the alleged group the White Wolves. I won't go into all the details, but just to point out there is some overlap with regards to the personnel involved in these groups, and it's difficult to say how much the groups are either infiltrated by state assets or indeed set up by the state in the first place. Here's a comment from a series of World in Action programs about Combat 18.
In spite of the race-hate material contained in these magazines, neither Will Browning nor Charlie Sargent have been charged. While Mark Atkinson, Charlie Sargent and Will Browning continue to push their message in football, the violence they encourage spreads.
When I watch these old documentaries about Combat 18 and its links with football violence, links with Northern Ireland loyalist groups, links with United States Ku Klux Klan, I get the feeling there is something disingenuous about these programs. They're not giving you the whole picture, and deliberately failed to expose the entirety of state manipulation, which is a key component within such groups.
So what conclusions did C18 draw from that incident about the role of Charlie
Sergeant
Sargent?
must have been working with Special Branch.
Is it possible that Copeland was involved with or influenced by such groups, and that state assets knew about this?